and welcome to our latest episode of Dynamically Speaking. Today, we're pleased to welcome Mark Cassetta, who is the new Chief Product Officer for Axiomatics. Welcome, Mark, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Kelly. Excited to be here and on the podcast.
Excellent. So, Mark, we had a few questions, but maybe we'll start with a pretty basic one. But what made you interested in joining Axiomatics?
Well, it's a great question, Kelly. It's a fun question to answer on a number of fronts. I guess I'll start first. People. I mean, when we talk about software, yes, it's software is a technology business and it's building products, but really it is about a people business, right? You're working with so many people on a daily basis to make great things happen. And so as I got to know the existing team that's been at Axiomatics and sort of the culture that's been created around this mission focused on being the leading enterprise authorization solution, that obviously got me really excited. Speaking with the founders back and sort of seeing what their passion lies in this, how their passion lies in the solution was, that's all very important to me. And then of course the opportunity to work with a leadership team and folks like yourself, again, that I've worked with in the past that, we've done great things together with. And, I look forward to being able to do the same thing here at Axiomatics as we look to serve our customers.
For sure. It's definitely exciting and always great to work with you, Mark. Certainly, the feeling is quite mutual. So, I know you're still in your first month here, but as you're exploring things and talking to customers and other influencers, both within and without Axiomatics, what do you feel is the opportunity that lies ahead for authorization as a market?
Yeah, I mean, and obviously, and frankly, that even feeds a bit into the first question. I mean, the space is at this incredible inflection point. And one of the other reasons why I was super excited to join Axiomatics was I've been following Zero Trust for more than a decade now, back to my days at Titus, back to when we had John Kindervag present at our customer conference when Titus was roughly the same size as what Axiomatics is right now. And I got this sort of exposure to how important Zero Trust was in the paradigm of the cybersecurity architecture. And as it's evolved and we look at how it's matured in the market, many organizations realized that, they had to take some of the first basic steps before they really got to embrace the full value of Zero Trust around authentication and just getting basic multi-factor authentication in place. But as those steps have certainly been taken across the enterprise, as people realize that's just basic hygiene at this point, they're now looking to the next step, which is really around authorization, right? So if I'm building applications or if I'm deploying applications, the big question becomes, who has access to this, but what kind of access do they have, and when should they have that access, and what's all the other attributes and context we want to bring into that equation and make sure we really reflect the right Zero Trust policy as people are accessing our data and applications. And so as I looked at Axiomatics, that became a very clear opportunity, and certainly the market is in the right place to embrace that.
Excellent. And I mean, speaking of the market, we know identity and access management, IAM as a market, has been around for a really long time and has never been so popular, I would think, as it is now. So that's meant there's a lot of noise in the market. There are a lot of competing interests advocating for different things. So as you're parsing through this and particularly in your discussions with customers, what is your guidance for those organizations looking to cut through the noise and get a crystal clear understanding of what it is they need and where it is they need to find that?
Yeah, it's another good question. I think this is something I've been thinking a lot of as we look to communicate to our customers, sort of the value that we bring. And the way I've started to think about it is looking at policy through kind of a methodical process in terms of how it gets developed, right? So you're obviously, as an organization, if you've embraced Zero Trust, you're thinking about how do I bring Zero Trust policies to my business, whether that's on the authentication front or on the authorization side. As I look to plan those policies, then I got to design and build them and deploy them into applications. And so that to me becomes the first step. And as we're thinking about authorization specifically, we're building these policies that are going to sit within the application at multiple layers within the app, right? As people are coming into sort of that, when they first get access to the app, and as they go into the depths of the application, and even into some of the into the database side of it, that's all about runtime authorization and runtime policy, and in some cases, like we've heard from analysts, this notion of just-in-time authorization, right? So that's kind of, I'd say, the first major piece of the puzzle, and obviously where we feel strongly, of course, that Axiomatics plays an extremely valuable role. Now, the second half of it then is managing entitlements and managing the least privilege, that making sure that you're deploying a least privilege model, which of course is critical to the entire equation. And that ongoing management and administration is something that we're seeing a lot of players participate in. And I think certainly the privilege access management market is huge because of that. And then we're seeing things like cloud identity and entitlement management, more specifically on cloud infrastructure, play a role in helping cyber teams better understand all the entitlements that are happening in that environment. And of course, Axiomatics can continue to play, or I'd say specifically authorization can continue to play a role there. But I think that I almost look at it between there's sort of this need for runtime, just-in-time authorization based on zero trust policies that are focusing on why, what, who, when, how, and ultimately driving some sort of action. And then there is the ongoing administration and management of those authorization policies in the process. And so that's how I started to kind of break it down.
That makes complete sense. And then I think as a follow-on to that, once folks have kind of figured out all of the different layers between identity and identity governance and authentication and then authorization, and that's even aside from what you look at it at zero trust when you start to break it down. For somebody who is looking at Axiomatics specifically, what are the critical things that you would want them to take away from that look?
Yeah, it's a great, another great question. I think we're going to call this episode "Another Great Question." No. No, so when I look at the space and we look at cybersecurity in general, there's a lot of product out there, and there's a lot of companies trying to solve these problems, and there are, I'd say, few companies that have stood the test of time of being there and scaling to the needs of enterprises and solving really hard problems. And frankly, that's where Axiomatics has come from. It's had to go down the path of making customers successful and making large organizations successful with authorization for the last decade. And so I guess the first thing is, when you think of what you need in an authorization solution, the first thing you need is scale, right? You need to be able to know that what you're going to deploy isn't just about one application, it's about the entire environment. And obviously for us, that's something we built Axiomatics for, not just in for the last decade, but for the next decade, as we look at sort of the cloud native realities that organizations are operating in. The second is, when it comes to Axiomatics, what's interesting is, I don't think this is a surprise, we may have had a perception of being, really being able to build these really demanding, complex policies, and that's a huge strength of ours, which is true. But what the ethos of this business has been is, I hate to use this word because it can be overused, but they've been trying to democratize authorization, right? So everything that we look at when it comes to making authorization successful, there's multiple stakeholders in a business that need to be enabled, right? You've got sort of that CISO level that needs to just understand that they're following best practices and that they're deploying the right policies and that it's lining up to their broader security strategy. You've got the business that needs to be able to translate just requirements into policies, and frankly, don't really want to get their hands into the actual app. They want to lean on their IT and security team to do that. And then you got the developers who, in some cases, are like, look, I could write code that's going to reflect some really, reflect the unique policies that we need. And I want to make sure the solution can actually, support that and deploy it. And so for us, I guess the other key component of this is we want to, like I said, democratize it and enable authorization to be accessible by, all the key stakeholders, and give them the tools they need to get up and running quickly. And so that's been a focus of the business, and obviously as we go forward, it's going to continue to be a focus as well.
That's terrific, Mark. And certainly, from all of these answers, you'd think you'd been with Axiomatics for years, which is phenomenal. And I mean that in the very best way. But given, that this is a new role, what are you most excited about?
Yeah. Well, I think as we've been thinking about that, Kelly, so it's as much about, so obviously we want to give folks the tools to be able to build the right policies at whether it's that initial crawl phase or even as they evolve into a more walk and run strategy. So we're going to be there with them in that entire journey. But sort of underpinning that is been this discussion we've been having internally about the need to orchestrate authorization, right? So if you think about it, and you've seen analysts like Gartner talk about this need to centralize accountability and decentralize policy creation, and that's really, that's really what we're talking about, is how do we look, the CISO or the identity leader, which could be the same person or in some cases different depending on the organization, they're the conductor. They're the ones who are accountable for making sure that the right policies are deployed at the apps, and that the right, that their developers are, and their teams are enabled to build the policies they need to protect their information. So how can we make sure that, so when we look at orchestrated authorization, we're saying, how do we make sure that that CISO is enabled with all the tools that they need to model those policies, to translate perhaps existing policies that may have been written in open source into, or not necessarily translate, but actually be able to enable open source policies. And then there's also this need to be able to visually provide information about how those policies are being written and whether they align to the requirements that the business is looking for. And of course, there's all the integrations that need to be done as well that we support today, but there's also opportunities for more integrations in the future. And so, while it sounds a bit high level, from a strategy point of view, we're really framing up kind of the ingredients that we see are required for this, for orchestrated authorization. And yeah, I'm excited to bring that to life.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Mark. I think we're at the end of our time, but I want to thank you so much for being here, for sharing so much of your vision, and yes, lots of exciting things to come. So thank you again, and we hope to have you back on the show soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelly.